Good day, everyone. So for today, we will have another topic, which is on the muscular system. So this is my topic outline for today. We have the functions of the muscles, the properties of the muscles, the types of muscle tissues and their specific characteristics, the different muscle proteins, and then yung structure ng isang skeletal muscle fiber, and then we have the muscle contraction. However, for this discussion, I will just be discussing the five topics, and then we will have a separate discussion when it comes to the muscle contraction kasi medyo komplikado itong muscle contraction na part. Okay, so we have here the first one. We have the functions of the muscle itself of the farm animals. So number one function is usually the body movement. So usually yung mga muscles ng animals natin, and even though naman sa mga tao, it usually enable yung mga voluntary movements ng katawan nila, lalong-lalo na sa mga different farm activities, like for example, walking, yung running, yung grazing. So usually they are responsible along with the skeletal system of these animals. Usually they are responsible, including the muscles, for locomotion and mobility. The next one, we have the maintenance of posture. So, ito naman is tumutulong yung mga muscles na mag-maintain ng posture ng mga animals, and specifically with the balance. Okay, so usually sila yung nagpo-provide ng support and stability to the skeletal system. And then next one, we have respiration. So like for example, yung mga muscles that usually involve in respiration, such as yung diaphragm, it usually enable yung expansion and contraction ng lungs. So it allows the farm animals na makahinga, okay, and makapag-exchange ng oxygen and carbon dioxide. Like for example, the diaphragm in cattle, it usually contracts and relaxes during breathing para ma-facilitate yung exchange ng gases doon sa kanilang lungs. And then another one, production of body heat. So yung mga muscles natin nagge-generate din ng heat through metabolic processes para makatulong na ma-maintain yung body temperature ng animals natin, especially pag malamig yung panahon. Like for example, sa mga baboy, yung shivering reflex nila, it usually involve a rapid contraction ng kanilang muscles para makapag-generate ng heat and ma-maintain yung body temperature nila, lalong-lalo na pag na-expose sila sa malamig na condition. Then another one is communication. So yung some of our muscles, usually these are involved in vocalization, no? Parang yung, like for example, doon sa larynx, okay, yung mga muscles doon sa larynx nagko-control ng tone ng vocal sound sa mga animals. Like for example, we have yung ano ba? We have the roosters. So ginagamit nila yung mga vocal muscles nila para makapag-crow. Okay? Yung parang hunin nila, like for example, during morning time, para makapag-signal sa mga other chickens, and especially naman pag mga roosters, they are usually marking a territorial behavior. Okay? So that is for communication. And then another one, constriction of organs and vessels. So, eto naman is nakakatulong na makapag-control ng blood flow and movement ng substances within the body of the animal. Like for example, yung mga smooth muscles doon sa linings or walls ng digestive tract ng isang animal, nagko-contract yun in rhythm para makapag-move throughout the digestive system yung kinakain niya. Okay, so that is constriction of organs and vessels. And then we have the last one, heartbeat. So alam naman na ninyo to that the heart is usually meron siyang specialized muscle which is in the name of the cardiac muscle that usually contracts and nagpapump ng blood throughout the body. So yung rhythmic contractions ng heart na maintain yung circulation. Okay, so those are some of the functions of the muscles. Now we have here the properties of muscles. Una dito is we have the excitability or what we call as the go back doon sa sinabi ko noon sa inyo, we have the irritability. So yung mga muscles natin, they can usually respond to a stimulus or stimuli such as yung mga nerve signals, okay? Yung mga chemical signals natin like for example, yung mga hormones or mechanical signals. Okay? So etong property na to nakakapag-allow na yung mga muscles natin na makapag-contract when it is being stimulated. Okay? And then second one, we have contractility. Yung mga muscle fibers ng animals, meron silang ability na makapag-shorten and makapag-contract when it is usually being stimulated by a nerve impulse or yung tinatawag natin na action potential. Kasi later on during the muscle contraction or doon sa latter part ng discussion ko, merong specific na words na gagamitin ko which is the action potential. So yung mga nerve impulses natin, yung mga nerve signals, these are what we call as the action potential. Okay? Etong property na to is usually essential yung ability ng muscle, no? The ability of a muscle to shorten with force, essential ito sa pag-generate ng force and pag-cause ng movement. And then sabi dito, it does not produce force by lengthening or pushing. So yung mga muscles natin, they do not produce force by lengthening or pushing. Kasi yung primary function is to contract and generate tension. Okay? Yung opposite action, lengthening, is usually controlled ng other muscles or external forces. Okay? And it is usually often a part of a coordinated movement involving both the contraction and relaxation of muscles. Okay? And then next one, we have extensibility. So yung mga muscles natin nakakapag-stretch, nakakapag-extend beyond their normal resting length. So etong property is usually allows the muscles na makapag-lengthen under tension, which is usually crucial sa range ng motion ng mga animals natin. Okay? And then we have the last one, we have elasticity. So, ibig lang sabihin, yung mga muscles, they can return to their original length and shape after being stretched or contracted. Elastic. Para nakapag-ensure na yung mga muscles, they usually they can rebound to their resting state after a contraction process. Okay? Now we have here the first one part. We have the cardiac muscle. So one of the characteristics of the cardiac muscle is usually branching cells. So anong ibig sabihin nito? So yung mga muscles natin, they usually branch and interconnected. Kung makikita ninyo ito, branching cells, so they have interconnection. So etong branching ng mga cells na to, it's usually important or efficient doon sa propagation ng mga action potentials or yung mga electrical signals across the heart para ma-ensure yung coordinated na contraction and yung synchronized pumping action of the heart chambers. And then another one or two nuclei per cell. Okay? So yung mga cardiac muscles natin, they usually contain one or two centrally located na nuclei. So this is usually in contrast sa mga skeletal muscle cells natin which are usually multinucleated. So madami yung nuclei nila per cell. And then the third one is striated. So similar to skeletal muscle. So yung mga cardiac muscle natin is striated. So meaning it has a stripe or banded appearance when it is being viewed under a microscope. So usually etong mga striations na to, they are being caused or they are being due to the organized arrangement ng mga contractile proteins including yung actin and myosin within the muscle cells. Okay? I will discuss naman yan later on yung mga contractile proteins natin or yung mga muscle proteins natin. Okay, and then another one, involuntary. So yung mga yung cardiac muscle contractions, usually they are involuntary. So meaning they are not under conscious control. So yung mga contractions, they are being initiated or they are being regulated by the heart's electrical conduction system, primarily yung we have yung sinoatrial at saka yung atrioventricular nodes. Okay? Sinoatrial tsaka atrioventricular nodes as well as yung influence ng autonomic nervous system or the ANS. Okay? Take note lang when it comes to the involuntary, yung connected na nervous system is actually the ANS. Medium speed contraction, so nag-exhibit yung mga muscles natin, yung mga cardiac muscles natin ng medium speed contractions. Kasi it's usually, it contracts at a rate that is usually well suited para ma-maintain yung consistent and rhythmic na heartbeat. Okay? So, syempre yung mga rate na to, they can be influenced by other factors like for example, pag stress yung animal, pag meron siyang intensive na activity, pag merong influence ng mga hormones, yung mga yon. So that is for the fifth one. And then another one, syncytium. Okay, ano detoy? In terms of the syncytium, is usually a type of biological tissue or its structure that is usually formed by the fusion of individual cells into a single multinucleated cell. Okay? So doon sa syncytium, it's usually the cell membranes of the individual cells will become dissolved, allowing yung mismong contents nila, including yung multiple na nuclei, na makapag-mix and makapag-function as a single large cell. Okay? Yun yung ginagawa. And yung mga cardiac muscle cells natin, they are interconnected by specialized structures usually called as the intercalated discs. Okay? That should be C. Etong key na to. Intercalated discs. So etong mga discs na to, sila yung nakakapag-allow ng rapid na spread ng action potential and nakakapag-create ng functional na syncytium where yung entire heart, yung muscle ng entire na puso ng animal nakakapag-contract as a coordinated unit. Now, in terms of continuous contraction, unlike yung mga skeletal muscles natin, which can usually experience a complete relaxation between contractions, yung mga cardiac muscle natin, they exhibit continuous contractions, which is being known as yung, we have yung cardiac muscle tone. Okay? So, it usually ensures that the heart chambers will remain partially contracted. So, ma-maintain na niya yung baseline level ng pressure and makapag-prevent ng overexpansion ng heart. And then last one, we have endurance. Okay? So, highly resistant si cardiac muscle natin in terms of fatigue, and it usually can contract continuously throughout the life of the animal. Okay? So it usually pumps blood without rest. So ito yung kaya't nasa 1 nito in terms of endurance. Okay, that is for cardiac muscle. Then next we have the smooth muscle. We have number 1, fusiform cells. So kaya't nasa 1, in terms of the smooth muscle cells, they are usually spindle shaped or fusiform, which means they are elongated. Okay, elongated sila. So etong shape na to nakakapag-allow, okay, ina-allow nila yung mga smooth muscles na makapag-contract and makapag-relax in a coordinated manner to perform their functions. Okay? And number 1 yan is 1 nucleus per cell. So unlike yung mga skeletal muscle cells natin which are multinucleated, yung mga smooth muscle cells natin, they are typically meron lang silang isang centrally located na nucleus per cell. Okay? And then we have non-striated. So ang ibig lang sabihin nito, missing or lacking yung distinct na banding or striation that usually being seen sa skeletal tsaka yung cardiac muscle. Okay? Ano ba yung purpose? Okay? Yung absence ng striation na to, yung pagiging striated, okay, it's usually due to the arrangement ng mga contractile proteins in a less organized manner. Okay? And then we have another one, involuntary. So, just like with the cardiac muscles, they are regulated by the autonomic nervous system. And then we have another one, is slow wave-like contractions. So yung mga muscles natin, yung mga smooth muscles, they can contract slowly and nakakapag-exhibit sila ng rhythmic na wave-like contraction. So etong mga contractions na to, they are often coordinated and serve some functions such as pag mag-move yung substance through the digestive tract. Usually that is being called as peristalsis, yung pag-move ng substance through the digestive tract, or yung pag-regulate ng mga blood vessels, yung mga diameter ng mga blood vessels. So that is 1, yung mga contractions na to. And then another one, multi-unit and single unit. So yung mga smooth muscles natin, they can be classified into 2 types. We have the multi-unit and then the single unit, or also known as the visceral smooth muscle. Okay? So yung mga multi-unit na smooth muscles natin, usually they consist of individual na muscle fibers that function independently, and it is usually nakikita to sa structure, like for example doon sa iris ng mata. Okay, we have this one. In terms of the single unit na smooth muscle, nagpo-form sila ng interconnected. Kung makikita ninyo dito, interconnected yung mga cells, and they usually contract as a unit. Okay? So, etong mga to naman, nakikita natin to doon sa mga walls ng hollow organs ng digestive tract tsaka sa mga blood vessels. Now we have here peristalsis. That is contract and relax. So one of the functions na ng smooth muscle sa mga farm animals natin is makapag-generate ng peristaltic contraction, which usually nagpropel yung substances through organs, like for example the esophagus, the stomach, the intestines, we have the ureters, yung mga yun. So etong coordinated na to, or wave-like contractions, it usually facilitate the movement of food or fluids and waste products. Like for example, in terms of the esophagus, kung bakit from the mouth of the animal, or from the mouth until for the pharynx, So kung bakit na dumadaan yung mismong food doon sa esophagus kasi meron siyang contraction. So parang pinapalawak niya yung area ng esophagus. So that is what we call as peristalsis. Okay? Contraction and relaxation. And then another one, we have endurance. So they can sustain contractions over extended periods without fatigue. Like for example, pag magme-maintain ng blood pressure or yung motility ng digestive tract, so that is endurance. And then we have the response to hormones. Ito naman, it's more on yung mga hormones and yung mga neurotransmitters, they can modulate the activity of smooth muscles. For example, yung adrenaline or what we call as the epinephrine, usually this is being released during the fight or flight, no, na response. This usually can cause the relaxation of smooth muscles doon sa mga blood vessels. And then next one, we have the skeletal muscles. So sabi dito, long cylindrical cells. So yung mga skeletal muscles natin, they are being called as the muscle fibers. So long and cylindrical in shape. So etong pagiging elongated, na yung pagiging elongated structure ng mga skeletal muscles, it will allow them na makapag-generate ng force and makapag-contract efficiently para makapag-contribute doon sa movement and strength mismo ng katawan ng animal. Okay? Then ito na yung sinasabi ko kanina, multinucleated, so many nuclei per cell. So unlike yung other cells natin, yung mga skeletal muscles natin, they usually have multiple nuclei. So itong mga nuclei na to, they are located along the length of the cell and usually very important ito sa pag-support ng mga large size and yung mga mataas, yung mga metabolic activity ng muscle fibers. Okay, striated. So meron siyang stripe or banded appearance when it is being viewed sa microscope. So as what I've said kanina, the striation is usually being caused by highly organized na arrangement ng mga actin and myosin within the muscle fibers. And then in comparison with the two muscles kanina, they are voluntary. So they are under conscious control. And then rapid contraction, so capable din yung mga skeletal muscles natin for rapid contractions and they can usually generate high levels ng force. Like for example, pag running, jumping, okay, yung mga ganun. So that is rapid contraction. Now, meron tayong dalawa na ito is characteristic of the skeletal muscle. We have two types of muscle fibers. We have the fast twitch and we have the slow twitch fibers. Okay? So, ang difference lang naman to, we have oxidative fibers for the slow twitch and then we have for the fast twitch that is glycolytic fibers. Okay, we have here for the slow twitch fibers, also known as we have the type 1 fibers. So, etong mga fibers na to, from the word itself is slow, so they have a relatively slow contraction speed. And mataas yung endurance nila and they are usually reliant sa aerobic metabolism. Okay? So yung etong mga to, yung mga slow twitch na muscle fibers, actually they are suited talaga sa mga tawag nito, yung mga low intensity activities that usually require long-lasting na muscle contraction. Like for example, yung endurance natin in terms of running, lalong-lalo na kumbaga sa tao, in terms of 10,000 na meters, kumbaga na running in terms of athletics. So that should have a lasting, no, long-lasting na muscle contraction. So kailangan meron kang slow twitch na muscle fiber. So like for example din, in terms of swimming, so yung medyo mahaba na swimming, so that is for slow twitch muscle fiber. So number one dito, as it says here, aerobic metabolism. So they usually use oxygen para makapag-generate ng energy. So etong mga fibers na to, etong mga to, usually they are rich sa in terms of the cell, they are usually rich sa mitochondria, no? Kasi that is the cells, siya yung powerhouse, no? And it is usually responsible sa pag-produce ng ATP. And then myoglobin content. For the myoglobin content naman, yung mga slow twitch natin, they usually have a high amount ng myoglobin. So that is a molecule that usually binds and stores oxygen doon sa mga muscle cells. Okay? So bakit kailangan ng myoglobin content? Kasi it will allow yung mga skeletal, yung mga slow twitch, I should say, slow twitch na muscle fibers na makapag-transport efficiently and makapag-utilize ng oxygen during prolonged contractions para makapag-contribute sa endurance ng animals natin. Okay? And then third one, we have is slow contraction speed. So yung mga fibers na to, they usually contract more slowly than the fast twitch fibers, making them suitable now for activities that usually require a sustained effort over a time. Like for example, as what I've said, yung mga maintenance ng posture or prolonged na low intensity exercises. Then another one, we have high resistance to fatigue. So, ibig lang sabihin, yung mga yung mga slow twitch muscle fibers natin, they are highly resistant to fatigue. So, para ma-allow them na ma-maintain yung contraction for extended periods without hindi sila napapagod yung mga animals natin quickly. So etong mga endurance, as what I've said na to, is usually essential sa mga animal activities natin, lalong-lalo na sa for example, for horses, in terms of long distance na running, kumbaga racing activities, mga ganun. So that is for slow twitch. And then red coloration, that is just because of the appearance of, or presence, I should say, presence ng myoglobin and usually strong na blood supply. Okay? So, ibig lang sabihin, in terms of red na coloration, that is an indicator of their aerobic nature or aerobic metabolism. And then, we have, by the way, baka hindi nyo kasi alam kung ano yung myoglobin. That is usually, ito yung red coloring pigment. Siya yung nagiging cause kung bakit kulay red. Yung mismong, like for example, in terms of the muscle, although it will be discussed that one more comprehensive in terms of your its slaughtering subject, but then yung myoglobin, kung ano yung pagiging reddish, no, ng karne natin, it's because of the presence of the myoglobin. Okay? And then efficient use of fat for energy, that is very efficient itong mga fibers na to in using fat as a fuel source, making them well-suited sa mga activities that usually require a sustained energy supply. Okay? And then we have another one. We have the fast twitch fibers, which are also known as the glycolytic fibers or the type 2 fibers. So etong mga fibers naman na to, they are characterized by their rapid na contraction speed, yung high force na production, and in terms of the slow twitch, that is aerobic. For the fast twitch naman, they are reliant sa anaerobic metabolism. Okay, so that is number one. They rely on anaerobic metabolism, which means they generate energy without relying heavily on oxygen. Bakit kailangan to? Kasi para makapag-produce sila ng quick na burst ng force without the need of sustained na oxygen supply. Okay? And then another one, rapid contraction speed. So yung mga fast twitch fibers natin, nagko-contract sila quickly, making them suitable sa mga activities that usually demand rapid and powerful na muscle contraction. Like for example, sprinting, jumping, yung mga yon. So that is rapid contraction. And then high force production. So nag-generate sila ng high amount ng force para kasi nagre-require ito ng strength and power, lalong-lalo na pag nagpa-perform yung mga animals natin ng mga explosive, no? Yung mga explosive na movements nila, like for example, jumping, mga ganun. So that is for high force. And if for slow twitch is higher yung endurance nila, for the fast twitch it is lower endurance. So they have a lower endurance capacity compared sa mga slow twitch fibers. So meaning to say, they tend to have a fatigue quickly during sustained activity kasi walang anaerobic metabolism na nag-generate ng lactic acid. Okay? Mas maiintindihan niyo to later and pag meron na kayong ANSI 110, yung pag-generate ng lactic acid. And then we have the white coloration. So that is, they usually appear in white or pale due to the lower levels, of course, of the myoglobin. And merong reduced na blood supply compared sa mga slow twitch fibers. So, etong white coloration, if for the red coloration, it's an indicator of aerobic nature of the slow twitch fibers. For the fast twitch fibers, etong white coloration, that is an indicator of their anaerobic nature. Then another one na characteristic ng skeletal muscle is cross-bridge formation. So doon sa sliding filament theory, it will usually explain yung muscle contraction wherein yung actin tsaka yung mga myosin filaments, although it will be discussed for the next discussion for the muscle contraction, they usually interact. So yung mga actin and myosin filaments within the muscle fibers, they usually interact para makapag-form ng cross bridges. No? So itong mechanism na to, it usually allows the muscle fibers to contract and generate force. Para alam niyo later on, para maintindihan niyo paano makapag nagko-contract and nagre-relax yung mga muscles and at the same time paano nakakapag-generate ng force. And then motor units, so they are usually, itong mga muscles natin, they are usually organized into motor units. So each consisting of a motor neuron and the muscle fibers. Okay? So meron silang specific na motor neurons. So yung recruitment ng motor unit, it usually allows for graded na muscle contractions ng mga varying forces. Okay? And then adaptation. So adaptive. So yung mga skeletal muscles natin, they can adapt to changes specifically sa mga physical activity. No? So like for example, if yung mga skeletal muscles natin, they can lead to yung tinatawag natin na muscle hypertrophy or that is the increase in muscle size para ma-improve yung strength and endurance. And then we have the muscle proteins. So that is number one, we have the contractile protein. So ibig lang sabihin, these are the proteins that usually aid or that usually regulate or help in contraction of the muscles. So number one dyan, we have the actin, no? The thin filament. So ito is usually um, globular to. So you will encounter that one in your animal nutrition. So it is a globular protein that along with the myosin, which is the thick filament, it usually forms the actin-myosin contractile units or what we call as the sarcomeres within the muscle fibers. So etong mga actin filaments na to, they usually slide past the myosin filaments during muscle contraction para makapag-generate ng force that is necessary for movement. However, in terms of the myosin naman, it usually forms the thick filaments doon sa muscle sarcomeres and it usually interacts with actin during the contraction process. So later on, merong mga tinatawag natin na myosin heads. No? Yung mga myosin heads kasi, they usually attach to actin filaments. It undergo a series now of biochemical reactions para makapag-generate ng muscle force. And then another one, regulatory proteins. So we have the tropomyosin and then the troponin. So ito naman is usually part na ng regulatory complex that controls the muscle contraction. So yung troponin tsaka tropomyosin, associated sila doon sa actin filaments. And it regulates now, nagre-regulate sila ng exposure ng myosin binding sites doon sa actin. Okay? So parang when the calcium ions na-release in response to action potential or the nerve signals, they usually bind to troponin. So para ma-change nila yung tropomyosin's position para ma-allow yung myosin na makapag-interact with actin. So yan yung ginagawa nila. Okay? And then we have the structural proteins. We have the titin. So ito naman is very crucial to. Parang ano siya, giant protein na for muscle elasticity and stability. So nag-a-act sila like parang spring siya na makapag-help doon sa muscle fibers na makapag-return sa resting length after contraction. So that is the purpose of the titin. Okay? So kung titignan natin, this is usually a structure now of the muscle, yung isang muscle. So ito na yung tinatawag ko na muscle fiber, kokonti lang, ang liit-liit. So usually it is being composed ng tatlo na connective tissue sheets. So we have the endomysium, the perimysium, and then we have the epimysium. So pag sinabi lang natin na endomysium, so kung titignan natin, usually thin film lang to ng connective tissue na nagra-wrap ng individual na muscle fibers or the myofibers. Okay? And then kung titignan natin, we have the perimysium naman, connective tissue din, but ang sinosurround na niya is bundles. So this is one bundle. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So parang ito, this 7 bundles na to ng myofibers. So if for the endomysium individual, for the perimysium, it is now bundles of muscle fibers. Okay? And then we have the last one, we have the epimysium. So that is now a connective tissue that usually wraps the bundles of muscle fibers as a whole muscle para makabuo na siya ng isang buong muscle. Okay? So yun yung difference ng tatlo na connective tissues. Now, tignan na natin ngayon yung structure ng isang skeletal muscle. So in terms of the sarcolemma, plasma membrane to ng muscle fiber. So it usually surrounds yung entire na muscle fiber. Kasi kung titignan nyo ito, this is a muscle fiber. So yung nagsusurround sa muscle fiber, that is what we call as the sarcolemma. Sarcolemma. Okay? So one function of the sarcolemma is actually for electrical signaling. Okay? Responsible to sa pag-transmit ng electrical signals or the action potentials that usually initiate and control the muscle contractions. So, meron tayong tatawag na sodium ions, the potassium ions, tsaka yung mga calcium na channels which are usually vital for the initiation and propagation now ng action potentials. Okay? So, second one, as what I've said, responsible siya ng pag-transmit ng action potential. So, action potential propagation. So, if yung isang motor neuron, di ba, if you could recall doon sa nervous system yun noon, we have three different neurons. We have the motor, we have the sensory, and then we have the interneurons. So, si motor neuron siya na yung nagkikerry, no? Siya na nagkikerry ng signal. Si sensory neuron kasi is siya naman yung gumagawa or nagtra-travel ng mga mismong sensory information. However, yung sensory information na yon, si motor neuron na yung magdadala. Okay? So that is motor neuron. So if the motor neuron stimulates a muscle fiber, magsasend siya ng electrical signal in the form of an action potential. So yung sarcolemma, quickly siya na magtra-transmit ng action potential throughout the entire muscle fiber para makapag-allow ng coordinated na muscle contraction. Okay? So yun yung ginagawa niya. And then another one, sarcoplasmic reticulum interaction. So si sarcolemma makikipag-interact with the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So this is usually a specialized na ER or endoplasmic reticulum na nag-i-store and at the same time, nagre-release ng mga calcium ions. So parang during muscle contraction, yung action potential conducted by the sarcolemma, it usually triggers the release of the calcium ions from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is usually essential for muscle contraction and relaxation. Okay, and then another one, regulation of muscle contraction. So, although, ano lang to, it's usually indirect lang. Indirectly lang na epekto in terms of this one. And then, maintenance of muscle fiber integrity. So, minemaintain niya yung structural integrity ng mga muscle fibers. So, it helps to protect yung interior ng muscle fiber and makapag-provide ng mechanical support. And then we have another one, exchange of nutrients and wastes. So permeable to. Si sarcolemma, it is permeable sa mga various molecules para ma-allow yung exchange ng nutrients, ng oxygen, and waste products between the muscle fiber and the surrounding na interstitial fluid. Very important to yung exchange ng nutrients and wastes kasi for metabolism, yung metabolic needs ng mga muscle cells natin. And then we have the last one, signal transduction. So ito naman is yung mga signal transduction pathways that usually regulate now yung mga cellular processes doon sa muscle, including yung mga protein synthesis, yung growth, yung repair, yung mga ganun. So that is what we call as signal transduction. And then another one, we have the mitochondria. So you all know already what is mitochondria. So that is energy production. So nagproduce sila ng ATP, the adenosine triphosphate. So that is usually the primary, that's what I said to you, that is the primary energy currency ng mga cells natin. Okay? Aerobic respiration, so yung mga mitochondria natin, they are the sites of aerobic respiration, which is the process by which yung mga cells, ginagamit nila yung oxygen para makapag-generate ng ATP from the glucose and fatty acids. Okay? Lalong-lalo na, for example, in terms of the skeletal muscles, especially during prolonged or endurance na activities, yung mitochondria within the muscle fiber, it usually helps to break down yung mga fuel sources para makapag-produce ng ATP through the oxidative phosphorylation. Okay? And then another one, fatty acid oxidation. So yung mga skeletal muscle mitochondria, involved sila sa oxidation ng fatty acids. So yung mga fats, nagsaserve ito as an energy source during for example, yung mga prolonged exercise, yung mga mitochondria, it will break down yung mga fatty acids into ATP. That is usually the process now, which is the beta oxidation. Okay? And then another one, oxygen storage. So nagre-regulate lang to. Nagre-regulate lang ng oxygen level doon sa muscle fiber. So temporarily na nag-i-store sila ng oxygen. Okay, then another one, muscle recovery. So after exercise or after a prolonged na activity, yung mitochondria, meron siyang role in terms of muscle recovery and repair. So nag-help sila, tumutulong sila na i-metabolize yung mga waste products and makapag-repair ng damage na muscle tissues. So papaano in terms of provision of energy. Okay? Mitochondria density. Ito naman is nagdedepende lang naman to yung mga endurance na trained na animals, they usually tend to have a higher density of mitochondria in their muscle fibers para of course syempre that is for the utilization of energy. Okay? Then mitochondria biogenesis. Ano naman to? It's usually the process ng wherein merong mafo-form na bago na mitochondria. Okay? Like for example, if the animal has an intensive na exercise or intensive na activity, lalong-lalo na for example, yung mga kabayo, yung mga horses that are being used for kalesa, kumbaga, or yung mga draft na animals natin, yung mga carabao that are being used in the field. So, ang tawag sa pag-form ng bago na mitochondria in response sa increase na energy demand ng animals natin, usually that is what we call as mitochondrial biogenesis. Para yung mga muscle fibers, they can increase the number and size of their mitochondria, which is usually merong higher level na ng energy production. Okay? And then muscle fatigue, yung mga mitochondria within the muscle fibers, nagde-delay sila ng muscle fatigue. So that is usually involved sa pag-maintain ng mga calcium handling, which is usually essential sa proper muscle function. And then another one, we have the myofibrils. So kung makikita ninyo, they are usually long and then cylindrical structures na it usually runs parallel to the length of the muscle fibers. So ito is the usually contractile elements of the muscle, and they contain yung mga proteins kanina, yung mga contractile proteins, which are the actin, and then we have the myosin. So yung mga myofibrils, they are organized into repeating units, which are now called as the sarcomere. So eto naman yung mga sarcomere, functional units lang to ng mga myofibrils, and usually they represent the basic contractile units of muscle. So kung makikita ninyo dito, they usually, ito yung buo na structure ng sarcomere, they extend from Z-disc to Z-disc. And usually they give the skeletal muscle yung striated na appearance. Okay? So ulitin ko, each na sarcomere, etong pinapakita ko is just only one sarcomere. Okay? So each sarcomere is usually bounded by two na Z-discs or yung tinatawag natin na Z lines. So parang nagsiserve ito as an anchor points for the thin filaments. Okay? Okay, one example dito, we have the thick and thin filaments. So, yung sarcomeres natin, they usually have two types of filaments. We have the thin and then we have the thick filaments. Okay, for the thin filaments, as what I have mentioned, the actin. So, they usually consist of the actin proteins. So, yung mga actins natin, they usually contains binding sites wherein yung mga myosin heads will attach during the muscle contraction. Okay, in terms of the myosin filament, ang mangyayari dito, yung mga myosin heads, they will extend outward from the thick filament and they will form cross bridges with actin. So parang meron siyang cross bridges with the actin during the muscle contraction. Now, paano ba yung sliding filament theory? So, in terms of this one, during muscle contraction, as what I've said, yung mga myosin heads, no, yung mga ulo ng mga myosins natin and the thick filaments, makikipag-attach sila sa actin binding sites and the thin filaments. Okay? So, yung mga myosin heads will usually pivot and pull yung actin filaments towards the center of the sarcomere. So, parang from the myosin filament, from the thick filament, pupunta sila, kukunin nila dito, kay makikipag-bind sila kay actin filament, tapos hihilain, no? Hihilain towards the center of the sarcomere. So yung sliding now ng thin filaments past the thick filaments, it will shorten the sarcomere, leading to muscle contraction. So once it is being pulled, no? Once it is being pulled, the actin filament into the center of the sarcomere, that is usually already a muscle contraction. But then I will have a separate discussion on the muscle contraction. Now, we have here the A band, I band, and then we have the H zone. Okay? So yung mga A band lang natin, usually these are the dark region in the center of the sarcomere that usually contains both the thick and thin filaments. So parang ito naman, it usually remains yung kung ano man yung length nito, usually the same lang to during muscle contraction. Okay? Then we have the I bands, lighter region lang to on the either side of the A band. And it usually contain only the thin filament. Okay? So ito naman is siya yung nag-shorten during muscle contraction. We have the I band. Now we have here the H zone. Si H zone naman, this is actually a narrow region within the A band. So that is in the center of the sarcomere where only the thick myosin filaments are present. Ito din yung nag-shorten during contraction. Okay? Then we have here the ZDs. Ito lang naman is just the boundaries of a sarcomere and siya yung nag-anchor sa thin filament. So, it's more on maintenance to ng structural integrity ng sarcomere. Then we have the cross bridges. So as what I've said, mapo-form yung cross bridges if the myosin heads will attach to actin binding sites. So that is now yung attachment ng myosin heads to the actin binding sites. That is a key step now in muscle contraction. So yung energy for cross bridge formation is usually will come from the ATP na napoproduce. We have here calcium regulation. Yung calcium regulation naman, that is that yung availability ng calcium ions within the sarcomere, that is very crucial for muscle contraction. So as what I've said kanina, the calcium is being released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum when an action potential travels along the sarcolemma. Okay? and it will now initiate the sliding filament mechanism. And then for muscle relaxation, if ang mangyayari naman dito, if there is a muscle relaxation, when the calcium ions are pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, preventing now a continuous muscle contraction. So yung mga sarcomeres, they will return to their resting length. That is usually a muscle relaxation already. Okay? So if muscle contraction, yung mga calcium ions are being released, so that is muscle contraction. Pag yung mga calcium ions, they are pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum para ma-prevent yung muscle contraction. That is now a muscle relaxation. So in that case, yung sarcomere will return now to their resting length. Now, meron din tayo ditong the M-line. Ano naman yung function ng M-line? So this is just a protein structure in the center of the A-band that usually anchors the thick filament, and it usually helps maintain yung alignment within the sarcomere. So thick filament anchoring. So as what I've said, i-anchor lang niya yung thick filament so that it's composed of the myosin proteins at the center of the sarcomere para lang ma-align. Then its stabilization, it contributes now to the stability of the sarcomere during muscle contraction. Organization, so by anchoring now to the thick filament, yung M-line, it will assist in the yung arrangement ng actin and myosin filaments, ensuring that they will slide past each other efficiently during muscle contraction. Okay? So in terms of tawag nito, in terms of muscle contraction, during muscle contraction, ang mangyayari dito, as the sarcomere shortens, yung H zone, which is the region in the center of the A band, it will become narrow, or it will become disappear. So yung M line, it will remain in place para ma-help yung, or para ma-maintain yung integrity ng A band, okay? Para ma-maintain yung integrity ng A band tsaka yung structure. Okay? So as if there is a myosin heads now, if there are myosin heads now, doon sa thick filaments, okay, as what I've said, as the myosin heads of the thick filaments interact with actin binding sites and the thin filaments and pivot during contraction, yung M line, it will ensure that the thick filament maintain their position and they will not disalign during the process. So yun yung very important na role ng M-line. Now, in terms of this one, meron tayong, it is composed of myomesin and M protein. So this is usually yung composition na ng M-line. Okay? They are being composed ng proteins, including yung myomesin, and then we have the M protein, which usually help in connecting and stabilizing the myosin filaments within the sarcomere. Okay? So ano yung usually na unique na structure? So since si M-line is more on tawag dito, it's more on stability and pagko-control, pag-a-anchor ng thick filament, nagiging stationary siya. Okay? So it will not move during muscle contraction. Nagiging stationary siya. Para ito yung magiging central, no, magiging central na reference point within the sarcomere. So that is for the function of the M-line. Then we have the last one. We have the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So as what I've said kanina, very important ito in terms of the regulation. Okay? Nagre-regulate siya ng intracellular calcium concentration doon sa mga muscle cells. So yung sarcoplasmic reticulum, siya yung nag-i-store and nagre-release ng calcium ions, which is, as what I've said, very essential sa muscle contraction and relaxation. Calcium storage, that's what I've said, that it's just for before na ma-release during muscle contraction, and then calcium release, that is now if meron na siyang usually ang nagre-release ng calcium ion, it's usually the action potential. So yung pag-trigger ng action potential, yun in terms of that one. And then interaction with troponin. So yung mga release na calcium ions, it will bind to the troponin. So in that case, if meron ng binding, it will cause a conformational change doon sa troponin, which now exposes the binding sites and the actin filament for the myosin heads, which will now initiate the contraction process. Okay? And then muscle contraction, muscle relaxation, that is just because of the calcium ions that are being released and being pumped back. And then excitation, contraction, coupling, ito is the process ng pag-convert ng isang electrical signal or the action potential into a mechanical response or the muscle contraction. That is what we call as excitation, contraction, coupling. So yung sarcoplasmic reticulum, siya yung nagiging central role sa coupling process by controlling yung release and uptake ng calcium ions. And then we have the last one, muscle fatigue. So meron din siyang role sa muscle fatigue as pag meron sustenance, pag merong sustained na muscle activity, it can deplete yung calcium na storage ng sarcoplasmic reticulum, impacting now the muscle contractility. Okay, so that ends my discussion for now. So for the next discussion, we have the muscle contraction.